We can start now. We are live, we can start.
Okay. My dear viewers, very good evening. This is Vivekananda, an author, academician, and a public intellectual. We welcome you for this spectacular show that is Education Pe Charcha. And indeed, this is 35th session. Of course, in collaboration with B.R. Ambedkar University of Social Science, which is represented by Dr. Shri Surendra Pathak ji. My dear viewers, Education Pe Charcha, as you all, that is not the question of my making this statement, because you all would very much agree in letter and spirit that education pe charcha is equivalent to educating the nation. In as much as we keep on inviting all the distinguished people, distinguished achievers in their myriad field of specialization to bless and bless education pe charcha. And in course of the continuation of the series of our program, as I already informed you, this is the 35th session, wherein we have also we are having the pleasure and the privilege of inviting one of the most distinguished bureaucrats to have functioned in a very upright and efficient manner, to have brought glory for the nation as such. Of course, my dear viewers, we have already had the bestowal of divine grace, and indeed, the great privilege of inviting such topmost constitutional functionary, the topmost bureaucrats like Shri V.S. Sampath, one of the illustrious chief election commissioners of all time, and of course Namak Ka Daroga Shri Anand Kumar Singh ji, one of the topmost IAS officers of all time, Dr. Jain Singh ji, the Chief Secretary of Gujarat, another top class IAS officer. And in course of continuation of inviting the distinguished IAS officers, distinguished bureaucrats, today in the continuation of the same, we have invited a very distinguished face of bureaucracy, one of the most upright IAS officers, Dr. Anil Swaroop Ji, or Anil Swaroop sir. And most importantly, my dear viewers, it is a time before I just start giving an outline of his introduction. It becomes absolutely incumbent on my part to just to just tell you something, to just take you back in the era of Manmohan Singh, Sonia Gandhi, where the coal scam had broken out, and it rocked the polity and almost endangered the survival of the then government of Manmohan Singh and Sonia Gandhi. And as soon as that particular scam had blown over, and of course the Supreme Court had almost set aside all the judgments, decisions of the Manmohan Singh government, at that point in time, to contain the situation, the fiery situation, of course a new bureaucrat was invited to arrest the situation from spiraling out of control, Dr. Anil Swaroop ji, and who by virtue of his dexterity, by virtue of his leadership vision, he brought the situation back under control. And then he also served as a very distinguished Secretary of Education to the Government of India, where under he played a pivotal part in as much as institutionalizing the public-private partnership, and that also was something path-breaking, revolutionary step that he initiated. So of course it is very appropriate time that we should know something about Dr. Anil Swaroop sir. My dear viewers, Dr. Anil Swaroop ji, as I was telling you, he has a career spanning 38 years, and make it his motto, or you can say his favorite agenda is to make it happen. The man with the profundity of the sense of optimism has never known to say no or never say die approach is what he symbolizes, what he epitomizes. Of course, he began his career from political science from Allahabad University, and of course, means he received a coveted award of Chancellor's Gold Medal for being best all-round student. And before joining the Indian Administrative Service, he also served in the capacity of an Indian, IPS, Indian Police Service. Of course, all these we'll discuss in the question answer session. And most importantly, as I already informed you, a very illustrious core secretary to the government of India. Of course, you can say a very troubleshooter for the then Sonia and Manmohan regime. How he did all perform so, means legitimately and so efficiently. All that will come under discussion. He has been a strategic thinker and an innovative leader. Won several awards and nominations. The prominent ones being nominated as one of the policy change agent by the Economic Times during 2010, 2012, 2015, and 2016. And then most important, he has also been declared as one of the 35 action heroes in India today's 35 annual edition. All that will come for discussion. He's a last but not the least. I would like to just give you an outline. He even, as we know, as has been the institutionalized trend, that what has been ostensible, that bureaucrats once retiring from service, they often slip in hibernation. But that is not for Dr. Anil Swaroop ji. He has, even in the post-retirement phase, he has been a founder chairman of Nexus of Good, an initiative towards recognizing positive action and providing inspiration to the society at large to replicate them. He is also the author of the bestseller, Not Just a Civil Servant. Of course, a very important topic which will come for discussion. I very much welcome today our very honored distinguished guest to Grace and Bless Education Pe Charcha, Dr. Shri Anil Swaroop ji. Sir, you are very much welcome to Grace and Bless our Education Pe Charcha. And here, I go with the very first question, sir. This is the first question meant for you. Sir, you had your education from Allahabad University, graduating in political science. You were awarded Chancellor's Gold Medal for being the best all-around student. Could you kindly dig into your past to enlighten our viewers about your sophomoric days till your graduation from Allahabad University? Sir, your take now. Dr. Shri Anil Swaroop ji, a very distinguished bureaucrat, one of the topmost IAS officers of the country. Sir, your take now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jahad. Just a minor correction in the manner in which you are addressing me. I have not yet done a doctorate as yet. I have not written any thesis. So I'm not Dr. Anil Swaroop. I'm just Anil Swaroop. So you can call me Anil Swaroop without associating me with something which I don't own. Now, I had my schooling in Lucknow, and then my father wanted me to become an IAS officer. So I made his dream my own dream. And as was the wont during those days, most of the aspirants who wanted to become civil servants or in the IAS, they moved to Allahabad University, and there's a hostel called Amarnath Jha Hostel, earlier named Muir Hostel, which had this reputation of producing IAS officers. So I got my admission there, and I did my studies there. I did my bachelor's there. During my bachelor's, I did not have political science. I did in different subjects. And in master's, I did political science. I had political science. But very interesting part was that in class 12, I had physics, chemistry, and maths as my papers. So I was from science discipline. And I switched over to humanities in BA. And that was quite a switch because I had problems in expressing myself, both English and Hindi. I was not very good at communicating. So I made a conscious effort around that time to improve my language, my communication. It was a long drawn process. And nowadays, when I guide some of the aspirants to civil service, I tell them how to go about improving their communication skills, because now it's even more important in the civil service exam to improve your communication skills. That's where I did my master's in political science, and by God's grace, because of my all-round capabilities, I was primarily a sportsman. I was a debater. I used to like music, and I used to play a lot of games. And because of these all-round capabilities in which I represented at reasonable levels, I was given this Chancellor's Gold Medal, which I got there. And then I appeared for the first time in 1979 examination, when the Kothari Commission report had come and a new examination system had come from the IAS. For the IAS, in that year, I qualified for the police service. I didn't qualify. I couldn't qualify for the IAS. The rank was below. It was, I think, if I remember correctly, it was, I think, 234th. Next year, I appeared again, and then I qualified. My rank went up to 14th, and I got into the IAS. That's how my life in college and school was.
Thanks a lot, sir. And my dear viewers, here I would like to mention, because our revered guest today has just alluded to Dr. Amarnath Jha. My dear viewers, it is very, very important here to mention that, in fact, in the Indian history, only two examples, glorious examples we have had thus far, where father and son duo had presided over the destinies of two universities, two very, very distinguished universities in the country. One was Calcutta, where Sama Prasad Mukherjee and his father Astos Mukherjee, both of them were the really illustrious vice chancellors. Of course, in Allahabad University, Dr. Amarnath Jha and his father, both of them, Sir Gangarnath Jha, both of them were the illustrious vice chancellor of Allahabad University. And as our honored guest today has very much alluded to Dr. Amarnath Jha, under whose stewardship and guidance he had managed to crack civil services, I thought to just share with you this very, very important information. Thank you, sir, for giving us an insight into your very, very valuable sophomoric days, and as to how you graduated to become, to join the civil services. Now, out of sheer curiosity, I would like to ask you this question, sir, that once you already joined Indian Police Service, then what was the trigger behind taking up civil service yet again? Please, sir.
I wanted to become an IS officer, and my father also wanted me to become an IS officer. So my aim was to get into the IS. So first year I couldn't qualify, as I said. I didn't get marks as I had expected, and I corrected those mistakes during the second year. In the first year, when I appeared in the examination, I knew a lot, but I didn't know how to write it down in 30 minutes. That's the time available for answering a question. During the second year, I practiced a lot writing as well. And that was the only difference between first and the second year. I knew how to write an answer within 30 minutes, and I never ran short of time. And that's as a consequence of which I got better marks in the second year. And my understanding was, and I'm still quite convinced about it, that there is no better service than the Indian Administrative Service. In my book, Not Just a Civil Servant, my first chapter begins with my desire to become an IS officer because of my father. But at the end of the book, in the last chapter, I write, if I were to be born again, I'd like to be an IS officer all over again, because of the sheer opportunities that one gets as an IS officer to change things around, to help people who are helpless, and the enormous sense of satisfaction that you can derive out of doing good to people who are by and large helpless.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. My dear viewers, two important points I would like to make here, because sir has been tutoring IS officer in some way, in many ways. And most importantly, 2 points here invariably crops up. In case of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose also, his father or family members desired that he should crack Indian civil service, the predecessor of Indian administrative service today. And just to cater to the wish of his father, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose went on to qualify Indian civil service, just in a similar manner, or having a striking resemblance with the greatest Indian freedom fighter, our distinguished, respected Shri Swaroop, Anil Swaroopji, too. Just catering to the wish of father, he went on to become an IS officer. In the very first attempt, as you heard, even though he could not succeed the way he intended to succeed, he took the second attempt, but never gave up his hope. And second point, sir had said in course of answering to the very first question of mine, pertaining to communication skill, I do draw a very, very striking analogy with that of great constitutional jurist of this country, Nani A. Palkiwala, writes in his premier book, magnum opus, that is We the People. He too was a stammerer in his childhood, could not speak even, but later on, as he polished his communication skill, went on to become India's greatest constitutional jurist for all time to come. Likewise, our distinguished guest has been very frank enough to admit his own deficiency in the childhood, but how he transformed himself into such an accomplished communicator, it is all self-manifest, as you can see him speaking. Thank you, sir. Thanks for giving us so much, hints and so much clues and tips as well. I'm coming to next very, very important question now, because you already gave us an answer about your IPS. So I'm coming to a very, very important question now, because pertaining to your secretaryship during in the post coal scam, which virtually shook Manmohan Singh and Sonia regime. My dear viewers, I remember just after the particular scam broke out, Mr. Kapil Sibal had thrown a gauntlet at the then Comptroller and Auditor General, Mr. Binod Rai, that it was his arbitrary decision that led to all sort of tent getting associated with the government, because he openly had extended his challenge to Mr. Binod Rai to come for a public debate, because he says, Mr. Kapil Sibal still maintains his stand that it is all because of the variation in terms of valuation terms or valuation, you can say, methodology. That is what made the difference. There was no scam at all. This is the stand taken by Mr. Kapil Sibal. We will ask our distinguished guest also to to shed light on it, but a while later. So this is a very important question coming to you. You served the coal ministry, especially in the aftermath of the coal scam, which shook the erstwhile government of Manmohan Singh Sonia regime. Naturally, the humongous pressure would have been exerted upon you from the then government, whereas the various stakeholders too, including public, looked upon you with a sense of optimism and expectations. How did you manage to withstand such an acute pressure from the myriad stakeholders? My question, sir, your take now.
First of all, I must confess there was no pressure whatsoever on me. I was under no pressure. I got total freedom from the current government, the NDA government, and never ever did either the Prime Minister or the Home Minister put pressure on me to do something in a particular manner. So I did what I thought was correct. And I'm proud of that I did what I thought was correct. I came to conclusion because I had the occasion to look at a number of files, and I came to the conclusion, yes, there were a number of wrong allocations done, but to call it a scam was wrong. One is wrongs being done, that is a particular process not being followed to allocate mines, but scam in the manner in which it was displayed by the then Comptroller and Auditor General was incorrect. And I have written in both of my books, not just a civil servant, as well as ethical dilemmas of a civil servant. And I have given the details on why I felt that. In my clear understanding, as I said, there were wrongs in terms of the process of allocation. But to say that the loss was to the level as Mr. Binod Rai pointed out, I think it was incorrect. And I have explained that in my book, where I say that the manner in which calculations were done were incorrect. What Mr. Rai did was, he took the best of coal mines of Coal India as an exemplar. And on the basis of that, he determined that all other mines would have produced that much profit for those that were allocated those mines, which is absolutely incorrect. I have given one example in the book where I've said that Mr. Rai, or the Comptroller and Auditor General, went and averaged everything. So for him, the cost of mining was a particular value, whereas the variation in cost of mining, it varies from anywhere between 400 rupees per ton to maybe 3,000 rupees per ton. You can't average it. And I have written in my book also, and in subsequent articles, that as a CAG, he should have gone into calculation for each mine, determine the actual cost of mining for each mine, and then determine the margin that would have been available to the allottee. So whereas I said that, yes, there were wrongs done in the context of allocation of mine where the necessary process was apparently not followed, but the calculation of amount which created all the noise was incorrect. That was one wrong that he did. I have gone into the details in my book. The second wrong, which I think was something which impacted the functioning of bureaucracy, was that he went to town with it. I mean, he had a press conference where he announced, not he announced, but the deputy CAG announced, and it was made to look a scam with huge numbers, whereas those numbers were incorrect. Now, what that did was that all these civil servants stopped taking decisions on the files, because they perhaps thought, and probably rightly so, that they could be hauled up even if they were not at fault. I mean, Mr. Harishchand Gupta's case is a classic case where one of the most honest officers in the service, and I have had the occasion to belong to the same cadre, I've seen him work, one of the most honest officers came to grief because of the environment that was created. Now, the point is, it is very clear, and in number of judgments, it has been brought out very clearly that there is no trail of any money having come to Mr. Harishchandra Gupta. I have given one example in one of the case studies, and I've explained that in that particular case, the allottee who was given a particular mine presented documents which were incorrect. Now, how do we expect a Secretary Government of India to examine each document personally? Now, the tragedy is that the same document that came before the committee was seen by all the committee members. The same document went up to the Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. And only Mr. Harish Gupta was hauled up for that. Why weren't other members if it was wrong? My contention is it was not wrong. Because you can't expect, I've been Secretary Government of India, it is virtually impossible for Secretary Government of India to examine each document and verify for himself that's a correct document. I mean, that's the job of other people. When as Secretary Government of India, when you have presented certain documents, it is assumed that the document is correct. Because if you don't have that assumption, that governance will come to a halt. Because then all Secretaries Government of India will keep sending those documents to some thana somewhere to verify and personally see that everything is done. Governance won't happen. Now, if you hold a secretary responsible for a wrong document submitted by somebody, which is not apparent on the face of record, then you are impacting governance. So what the consequence of what the CAG did was devastating. I mean, I have told you one such consequence. What is the other consequence? When we auctioned the mines, the environment in the country was such that the entrepreneurs did not know whether they will get coal or not, and they had made investments. So they went on bidding for coal mines, which were uneconomic in nature. So consequently, ultimately, not all mines started mining of all those who were auctioned. So there were a number of wrongs that happened as a consequence. I would not call CAG report wrong. What I'm saying is that he went overboard. He didn't go into the details of each mine. He came to conclusions without examining every aspect. And consequent to it, he did enormous damage to governance in the country and to the coal industry. You know, coal industry took a lot of time recovering from it. The industry that was dependent on it. Again, I'd like to repeat, this is not to say that everything that was done earlier was correct. There were wrongs that were done. And I'm personally of the view, action should have been taken and is being taken against those people to whom this allocation was wrongly done, which is very fair. But to call it a scam and call everything wrong, you know, what happened subsequently? Mr. Vinod Rai or the CAG talked about mines allocated around 2004 and thereafter. The Supreme Court went to cancel all the mines from 90s onwards. It was devastating for the industry as a whole. And it took a lot of time for the country to recover from that. So it's because of the environment that was created. If you call a scam, then you'll say anything that happened since 1991, everything was wrong, which it wasn't. You know, in the beginning, in the 90s, the coal blocks, no one wanted to take those coal blocks. The then governments, whoever that were those governments, and there were many governments, were asking people to come and mine because they wanted coal production to go up. So if that, for example, in Noida, I'm giving you an example of Noida and you'll understand. When Noida was being set up, there was no school, roads were being constructed. So at that point in time, the Noida authority allocated plots to schools to run schools at a price which was not, so to say, which if you compare it with the current market price, you'll say there was a scam. Why did they allocate the plot at such a low price then? At that point in time, no one was coming. So you're inviting people, come and set up a school so that the value of the property around it goes up. Similarly, in coal, there were not many people coming to do mining because mining is not easy and simple. You invited them. Now, the CAG did not say you should cancel in the 90s, but the environment that was created as a consequence of this report led to cancellation of even those mines. Supreme Court did it. I don't think posterity someday will determine as to the amount of damage. I have written very clearly in my book. I have given those details and no one has as yet contested even a full stop or comma in the book that I have written. No one. I've gone in for open debate. I've called anybody. You come and tell me what have I done wrong. If I have calculated anything wrong, you tell me. And there are calculations that I have questioned in my book. No one has come back to me. So one was the direct damage in terms of what it did to the coal industry. I think the bigger damage was in the context of what happened to the bureaucratic functioning, where civil servants were not willing to commit themselves on the file. Let me tell you, as coal secretary, there are a number of cases in which joint secretary were not willing to write who should be allocated mine after the auction. Because they said, agar isme bhi kuch galti hogi to kya hoga? So I said, okay, don't worry, just give me the details. There were a number of files in which I initiated a recommendation. So it was pretty bad. But fortunately, by God's grace, things got sorted out. Because, in coal, the real problem was not coal block. The real problem was shortage of coal. We don't look at problems in the manner in which they should be looked at. Everyone thought scam is a problem. Now, why should there be coal block scam, so-called scam, or why there should be this maramari for coal blocks if coal production was sufficient in the country? Unfortunately, India sits on 300 million tons of coal, and our requirement is only 800 million tons. So what is the problem? So without understanding the real problem to increase. Now, once the coal production increased as it did in 2014, 15 and 15, 16, then all this maramari was not required. In fact, many people felt that why should we go on for coal mines if coal is available? So the real problem was coal, shortage of coal. And it's an account of shortage, as I keep saying, one of the reasons why mafia prevailed, whether in India or elsewhere in the world, are shortages. So instead of trying to shoot down the mafia, which you should, you try and increase the production or increase the supply. Once the supply increases, the rationale for existence of mafia will go.
Thanks a lot, sir. You just, in fact, dwelt at length on the nitty-gritty of the issue involved then. I would like to bring to your kind attention, sir, during 2011, if I'm not wrong, I had a meeting with the then chairman, he had just retired from the chairman of Coal India, Shri N.C. Jha, Nirmal Chandra Jha. And I met him in Delhi, wherein he had informed me as what you say, it stands corroborated by his statement also. He said to me that because of all these sort of problems cropping up, and there has been a paralysis in decision-making process because none was willing to take any decision. And so far as what your honored self says now, his statement then stands absolutely corroborated in the light of your own very, very rich experience. Sir, I would like to ask you, because you just said that Mr. Binod Rai went overboard. Now, it is, of course, a very critical question comes before all of us, that what should be the role of a bureaucrat, especially those who are holding the constitutional positions, like Comptroller, Auditor General, and Attorney General, all these positions. Should a Comptroller, Auditor General, and sir, here in this context, I would like to draw your kind attention to some sort of verbal duet that started in Calcutta between the former Speaker of Lok Sabha, Mr. Somnath Chatterjee, and a very illustrious Supreme Court Judge, Justice Ashok Kumar Ganguly. Since I hail from Calcutta, so the sort of debate, the point of debate was that Somnath Chatterjee was all along critical of Justice Ganguly, not being considerate about extraneous factors while adjudicating the matter. Because as per Somnath Chatterjee's contention, Justice Ashok Ganguly, by adhering to the letter and spirit of law, he had sabotaged or jeopardized the billions of investment through FDI into our economy. Whereas Justice Ganguly took the stand that for a judge, what is of supreme importance is to ensure that justice gets dispensed in letter and spirit. So as you said, that because of such a hype created by the then Comptroller and Auditor General, entire economy went for a tailspin, took a downturn. So don't you think, as you have said that in your book, you say that posterity someday will sit on judgment upon the conduct of the then Comptroller and Auditor General. But don't you say that CAG, after having indicted the then government, he took the Padma Bhushan and all the government positions later, indicts him in the very severest of terms? What you are saying on this, sir?
It would be wrong of me to pass judgment on anybody. I'm only trying to comment on what actually happened. My contention was that first, the CAG should have gone into the details of each mine and determined the possible loss rather than averaging and coming to a notional number. That distorted everything. That is one. Number two, he should not have gone to town with it. The task of a civil servant, including the CAG, who is also a civil servant, he may be a constitutional authority, is to finalize the report and submit it to the parliament. It is the parliament that takes, I mean, you can't go to town and hold TV interviews and start explaining who's wrong, what is wrong. I don't think he should have gone to town taking credit for a scam or for exposing a scam. That's not the job of a CAG. It's the job of a politician. He can do it. He can talk about it, make political currency out of it, but not of a CAG to go to hold TV interviews and his officers announcing this has happened. I distinctly remember this deputy CAG, I think in the case of 2G scam, flashing that CAG report in the press conference. Is that the job of a civil servant? Your job is, let's assume what he found was correct, though I say what he found was incorrect. Even on the assumption what he found was correct, he should have quietly submitted the report to the parliament and let the PSC, which is the repository of all report, looked at that report and taken action. I mean, he went to town with everything. That was undone. As far as he getting some awards or rewards from the government, my understanding of Mr. Rai is that he was an outstanding officer. There's no doubt people have very high regard for him. I also have a high regard for him. He was an honest officer. That's the message that I get from his cadre officers. I have nothing personal against him. All I am saying is that as CAG, probably he went overboard in the sense of going to town with his report. And secondly, he writes this in his book, not just an accountant. I have written in my book that he behaved actually like an accountant, not an auditor general. Because if you are an auditor general, then you'll go into the details. An accountant will look at the numbers somehow and speak about them. He spoke like an accountant. He wrote like an accountant. He didn't behave like an auditor general. But I would not call him, that he was not competent or he was dishonest. No, that is wrong of me to say. I think what he did as Comptroller and Auditor General, as I keep saying, posterity will define it. But my conclusion is very simple. He rushed to conclusions without going into the details with a CAG should go. And then second problem with him was that he went to town with it. Now, whether he's benefiting or losing only, I'm nobody to judge on that. Only time will decide whether he ultimately benefit or he regret what he said or what he did. Only he can decide. I can't decide for him.
No, sir, that is absolutely, agreement with what you say. And since he is your colleague, in as much as both of you are civil servants, both of you are IS officers. But sir, what I'm trying to say is, from the broader perspective, he is an honest man, upright, right man. Nobody is contesting, nobody is disputing. But because of his going overboard, the country, in terms of its overall economy, has lost. Because there was a paralysis in decision making. The entire economy went for a tailspin. So, invariably, unequivocally, entire nation was affected because of his going overboard. Should not he, because of his flagrant violation of the letter and spirit of what a bureaucrat should do, or what a constitutional functionary should do in the given situation, he should be taken to task?
No, let's try and understand. This has to be understood very clearly. And that is why I wrote this as a chapter of ethical dilemmas of a civil servant. What Mr. Rai did as Comptroller and Auditor General was not illegal. Let's try and understand this very clearly. It's not illegal. To me, what he did was unethical. Now, what is the difference between illegality and unethical? That I explain in my book. Because he did not violate any law. What he violated was what he should not have done as CAG, or what he should have done as CAG, which is not illegal, but a CAG is expected to go into the details before coming to conclusion. You can't assume, you can't come to conclusion on assumptions and make a huge announcement. That is. So there's nothing illegal, it's grossly unethical. Then to go to town to roadshow that he's discovered a great scam was also unethical. Now, as I keep saying, ethics are value system that you may have. He may disagree. He may say, my value system says that if I discovered something, I'll go to town. Fair enough. I'm nobody to judge him. What I'm saying is, in my understanding as a civil servant, I feel if I were in his place, first of all, I would have gone into the details of each mine and then only come to conclusion that this is the likely loss or this was the loss. And secondly, I would not go to town. I would submit the report to the parliament and let parliament take care of it. Why should I go to town? So these were the two important unethical things that he did. But I still say that you can't haul him up for any illegality because he didn't do anything illegal. I've yet to come across a law which he violated. He didn't.
Okay. Okay, sir. Actually, you just, in gist or in short, what we can say that the very gravitas, the post desires or post deserves, he failed to uphold that
Yes.
gravity. That is
Yes,
what you say.
that's right. That's right. That
Okay,
I've said it in so many words in my book.
Fantastic, sir. You explicated on this issue in such meticulous details. Obviously, our viewers would have understood, or the entirety of the concept of the scam and what exactly is something wrong, that you so skillfully and so with such a great articulation, you try to differentiate between both, and definitely the facts should have dawned upon our viewers. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for explicating or discussing on this very important issue. Now I'm coming to the very next question. So, especially in the wake of your, though it is but still important, especially in the wake of your predecessor S.C. Gupta's conviction for misrepresentation of facts, because this is what Economic Times says. It's not my statement, it is Economic Times comment. Say facts, you're taking over the department when the national attention was focused on it. What steps you initiated to restore the credibility of the coal ministry in the eyes of the people of India? Just one or two.
Okay. First of all, let me clarify that Mr. Harish Gupta did not misrepresent any fact. He presented the facts as were presented to him before the Prime Minister or the coal minister, and a decision was taken. There was no mala fide on his part to misrepresent facts. So that needs to be understood very clearly. It's very unfortunate it was presented as misrepresentation of fact by the coal secretary. He did not. Second, what we did was we used technology to such an extent that we made the entire process of coal block auction totally transparent. And I have been of the view, I experienced that during my previous assignment when I was heading project monitoring group in the cabinet secretariat to fast track projects of 1,000 crore. And there I felt that if you take your decisions and the processes are transparent in nature, mala fide can never be attributed to you. You may still commit mistakes, but you're not hiding anything. Everything is known, is in public domain. So one, what we did was, we did our groundwork and then we made everything totally transparent. In fact, in coal ministry, we had dispensed with files and papers. Everything was digital. And the coal block auction, when they happened, you could see it on the portal happening live. And as soon as the auction was over, we used to announce whose bid was the highest. And when we took a decision on the issue, the decision was immediately posted on the portal. And it is not that we didn't commit mistakes. We also committed mistakes. But the advantage we had was that the moment that mistake was discovered, because someone who saw on the portal used to immediately ring me up or tell us that this is not correct, we used to examine it and correct it. So we are human. I mean, every human being can commit a mistake. So if you are transparent and using technology to the hilt, then the chances are that mistakes will be discovered. And on the top of it, mala fides will never be attributed. Mala fides normally would be attributed if things are opaque, behind a curtain. If it is open, if I'm not hiding anything, obviously I'm not committing mistake. I could still commit a mistake, as I said, but there couldn't be any mala fides attributable to a decision that were taken. So use of technology, and second, getting the right agencies to carry out the process. So we picked up both public sector undertakings, MSTC, which did the auction, and the documentation part was done by SBI Capitals. And both were very competent set of people. The head of SBI Capital went on to become CMD of State Bank of India, and very fine leader, and his entire team, MSTC, the entire team, we sat together, went into details of it, and work out the process, which is valid even today. We started in 2015. This is 2022. 7 years down the line, virtually the same process is still valid today. So we created systems wherein hanky-panky cannot happen. I can't guarantee, but my hunch is that it will be very difficult to distort that process now. So it has stood the test of time, at least 7 years, and I'm sure it will stand the test of time in future also.
Thanks a lot, sir. Indeed, of course, the sort of mechanism that you institutionalized Of course, as you say, and of course, we very much buy your logic, by your contention. It has withstood the test of time, and definitely it will augur well for the nation. But sir, before I switch over to the next question, I would like to ask you a very important question based on your own observation, your own explication. That, as you said, Vinod Rai had committed a wrong. It was not illegal, but even Supreme Court had somehow maybe not intentionally, but nevertheless unwittingly was in the complicity with Mr. Vinod Rai's wrong, and thereby entire system was brought to a halt. So
No,
don't you think?
No, I don't think the word complicity is right. What Supreme Court did was, Supreme Court probably did the same thing at what Mr. Vinod Rai did, not as a part of an accomplice, but Supreme Court also did not go into the details. Because if you look at the judgments, and I've studied that judgment, they should have gone into the details. Averaging minds is the biggest error. You can't average the cost of mining. To me, that's very fundamental. And Mr. Vinod Rai came to a number, and because of the environment that was created around it, I think Supreme Court also got carried away. They did not either indulge in it or went into the details. They should have. The Supreme Court should have. And once Supreme Court endorsed what Mr. Vinod Rai said, then no one could question. If you question Supreme Court, you will hold up for contempt of court. So no one questioned the Supreme Court. Some did, but at that point in time, the whole environment was such that any questioning of that would mean that you are also a part of scam. Unfortunately, that is how we work in our system here, that anyone who wants to flow against the tide is somebody who's treated as, an accomplice in the crime. I don't think Supreme Court was complicit in this, but they should have gone into the details.
For I switch over to the next question here, it becomes absolutely pertinent to draw the attention of the viewers as well as our fellow compatriots that the Contempt of Courts Act 1971 indeed deserves a proper amendment, because even the judicial scrutiny should be judicial decisions should be brought under the public scrutiny.
No, Mr. Jha, let me come in here, because you raise a very interesting point.
Sir,
a Supreme Court judge holds a press conference against this Chief Justice of Supreme Court. It is a clear case of contempt. Why weren't contempt proceedings started against those judges who held up? Wasn't it bringing down the reputation of the Supreme Court? They didn't. I may be held of contempt of court for raising that question, but those Supreme Court judges who held a press conference against Chief Justice were not held up. Number one. Number two, not only was no action taken against those judges, one of them became Chief Justice Chief Justice of India. Then there was a case of sexual harassment against that Supreme Court judge. There was a compromise. How can you have a compromise in a sexual harassment case? Now, the lady who was making allegations against the Chief Justice of India, if she was making a wrong allegation, she should have been hauled up for contempt and criminal action should have been taken against her. If she was correct, then action should have been taken against Chief Justice of India. There can't be a compromise in sexual harassment cases. There was a compromise. And not only that, that Chief Justice goes on to become Member of Parliament, nominated by the President of India. I sometimes feel ashamed that I had to write a book on ethics when ethics has been thrown out of the window, if you look at this entire case.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely the agreement with you, my dear viewers. In my latest book, A Journey from Rajniti to Lokniti, I have just portrayed all what our honored guest, respected senior IS officer has just now articulated. Of course, at time when I begin reflecting over the state of affairs of the nation, I stand absolutely at a loss to see where the country is going today. Of course, what sir has said, severely indicts all the judges, and of course, the very apex court itself, that Supreme Court, which is a watchdog of a parliamentary democracy, itself has lost or has been speedily losing the own credibility in the eyes of the people of India. This is really a very sorry saga, which needs a course correction, that also early as possible. Otherwise, the parliamentary democracy is absolutely off balance today. As sir has very correctly pointed out, I never expected that he should be so candid and so unambiguous in terms of his assertions of all those vital facts which normally people, normally people avoid or abstain from, abstain from articulating in public place. But he has that sort of audacity to call a spade in public forum. I salute you, sir, for being so candid in terms of confessing the sorry saga that bedevils our republic today. Thanks a lot, sir.
No, let me clarify. I'm not a pessimist. I'm pointing towards such incidents that put us to shame. But I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist because what I see now of Supreme Court, I think some of the judgments are absolutely phenomenal. They are trying to restore the dignity of the Supreme Court. We may disagree with the judgment. Agreement, disagreement is a different point. But what happened in the case of that particular Chief Justice of India puts the entire system to question. But the good news is that it is behind us. Now we see again people talking of justice, delivering justice in the sense that it should be delivered.
Thank you, sir. Of course, sir, if you can recall, and my viewers, if you can recall, just with the very recent days, maybe a couple of months back, I went, across some piece in Indian Express, where the incumbent Supreme Court Judge Y.K. Chandrachud, a very upright judge, has publicly called upon the people of India to speak up. And that shows that Supreme Court is slowly and gradually, it is standing up to perform its responsibilities as a watchdog to the Republic. Thank you, sir, for vouching the fact, through your own, experience, going through all those very, very important latest judgments of the Apex Court. Sir, I'm coming to the next question now because since you already explained us about this, so I'm now switching over from court to your education portfolio, because you have performed such a great, a leadership role. You perform in the capacity of presiding over the then Department of Education, that is in the School Affairs and Literacy. Sir, I'm coming to a very important question now. During your innings as the Secretary of School Education and Literacy, you fostered the public-private partnership to improve quality of school education. Could you throw an adequate light on the mechanism of public-private partnership that you claim to have institutionalized? Your take on this, sir.
When I was posted as School Education Secretary, I was a bit surprised because probably I was the most illiterate, uneducated civil servant to have ever been posted as Secretary of School Education, in the sense that I had no experience whatsoever in school education. But I was posted as School Education Secretary. But I was a bit happy because I thought I will be coming out of dark dungeons of coal mines into bright lights of school education. But to my utmost horror, I discovered that whereas in coal sector, all the mining was underground and the mafia was overground, in school education, I found all the mafias underground eating into the essentials of Indian society. It was terrible. And I have written a few chapters in my book regarding the mafias of school education, but I'll not touch upon that right now. I'll talk about the public-private partnership. So, when in India, when people around you find that you are not equipped, there are a lot many people who come to help you. And, we call them in UP Rai Saab. These are advisors. They themselves would not have done much, but they come and advise you. So there are so many advisors around you. So many advisors came to me, both from here and across the Atlantic also. The advisors came and they advised me, sir, why don't you go to England, Finland, Holland, Scotland, New Zealand, all the lands of the world to find out good education and import those models. So I remember having asked one of the advisors, have you seen Motherland? So he didn't understand. My understanding was, let us see what is happening in this country before going out to see what is happening there. So what I did was, I traveled to around 24 states in the first 3-4 months of my existence as Education Secretary. And when I say states, it was not merely state headquarters. I went deep into interior areas. The first 2 districts that I visited were Bastar and Sukma in Chhattisgarh. Then I drove from Pune to Goa, dropping down on the way in interior areas to see how school education was. I traveled from Srinagar to Leh, not taking the national highway, going deep inside mountains to see how education is happening, and so on and so forth. During these visits to the states, I discovered some fabulous work being done by civil society organization and NGOs, non-governmental organization, along with the state governments. And that's where the public-private partnership idea came to my mind, that there are so many good models in the country. So what I did was, I selected about 110 such models of public-private partnership, called them over to Delhi and spent 6 days with them, intensively interacting with each one of them and understanding more about the public-private partnership, and picked up 24 such models and took them back to the states through various workshops. And I'm glad to tell you that I'm in touch with some of them still through the Nexus of Good. And I find a lot of those models replicating and scaling. That's where my idea of public-private partnership came in. And I felt very clearly that our understanding of each other is incorrect. You know, everyone in the government feels that these private people are chore. They don't do any work. They're only for profit. And everyone in the private sector feels that everyone in the government is corrupt. And both are wrong. There are good people on either side of the fence. The tragedy is all the rascals and ruffians, they come together and create life difficult for us. But the good people don't come together. Good in the private domain, good in the public domain. They're wonderful, wonderful people. That was my discovery during the travels to the States. And that's what got me going on public-private partnership. It made my task very easy for the simple reason. I gradually discovered in my career that the efficiencies come from the private sector and the scale comes from the government sector. Generally speaking, I mean, there are efficient government organizations also. There are some private organizations by scaling, but broadly speaking, efficiency from the private sector and scale from the government sector. If the two can come together, you can have efficient scaling more of the models. That's what I did. And let me give an example since we are running out of time. I'll give you one such example to illustrate what I saw in the field. And as I said, number of examples, some of them are there in the Nexus of Good portal. I walked into a school in a place called Pastepada in state of Maharashtra. It was about 120 kilometers north of Thane district in tribal areas. I was told that this primary school does not, it was a government primary school, does not have electricity. So I said, let's go and see. When I visited there, the teacher, it was just one teacher in that school, 2-room school. He came out to receive me because he got to know that I'm coming. He took me to the classroom and I was shocked what I saw. I saw every child had a tablet and there was a smart screen. So I asked him, where do you get electricity from? I was given to understand you don't have electricity here. How do you charge these tablets? He took me around those 2 rooms and showed me foldable solar panels, which he had created for charging the batteries through which he was charging these. Then the next question was, where did you get the money to buy these tablets? Because there are about 40-50 tablets in this room. So then he narrated his story. He said, sir, when I came to the school, there were about 40-50 children in the schools. Many of them never came to the school of all ages, shapes, and sizes. He didn't know what to do. So he had a second-hand laptop. And where his place of residence, he had some internet. So he used to download some educational videos, come to the school and play those educational videos. So these children used to sit around and they used to feel very excited. So after 2 months, about 20 parents came to the school and asked this teacher, Sandeep Good, a very funny question. They asked him, teacher ji, pehle to bacche aate the nahi school, ab jab se aap aaye bhagte hain school, kya kiya? So he explained to them, hum inko video dikhate hain shayad, probably they are fascinated by that. So when he found these parents interested, so he requested them, can you all contribute 500 rupees each? I want to buy 2 more tablets. Now these were poor people, but they contributed. So he bought those 2 tablets, attached them to his laptop and made them into 3 groups. Now this passion of the teacher got to be known around, and some CSR funding agency along with an NGO, they visited the school. And when they interacted with the teacher, they was very excited. Ye to kamal ka teacher. So they volunteered to fund these tablets and a smart screen. I was also very impressed. So I took a photograph with this teacher, Sandeep Gund, and I tweeted it. Suddenly he became a local hero. So teachers from other schools started visiting this school and started doing not exactly the same thing, but somewhat similar things. In between, I met the President of India, Mr. Kovind, had just taken over as the president. So I had gone to call on him for some other work. But as there was some time as we were sitting, I narrated the story to him. He was also very impressed. So I asked him, would you like to meet the teacher? He said, why not? So I called the teacher over to Delhi. He met the President of India. photograph taken, it was tweeted. Suddenly, Sandeep Kund became a national hero. Now, this is not the end of the story. The Pastepala model, where he had got these tablets, subsequently got replicated in more than 50,000 schools of Maharashtra. That's the scaling that happened. That's the power of public-private partnership. The 350 odd crores of rupees required for digitizing those schools, not a single penny came from the government, but these schools were all government schools, all crowdfunding. You know, one of the first chapters that of my forthcoming book is on Pastepala model, on public-private partnership, and there are many such examples of public. I came to believe that public-private partnership is the way forward. I tried to institutionalize it, not so much in the government, but I institutionalized it through my organization, which I set up after retirement, Nexus of Good.
Great, sir. Actually, it was so engrossing. You know, the bureaucrats like you, like Sri Anand Kumar Singh ji, these people, they, of course, they are the crown to the throne of bureaucracy, because only because of such a pioneering initiative, the transformation of the entire, the length and breadth of India is very much feasible, because you people made it possible for us to see that indeed the transformation has begun, at that too at a very faster pace. Really, sir, I am rendered speechless. The moment you narrated such a very, very interesting, captivating story, it was really, I have nothing to say. A nation indeed needs a bureaucrat like you, like Sri Anand Kumar Singh ji, like Dr. Jayan Singh ji, of course, like Sri V.S. Sampath sir, indeed, really great. Sir, I'm coming to a next very, very important question, because, sir, we may extend time. That is not a barrier now, because you are giving us, you're enlightening us on so many myriad issues that is for the good of the entire nation, because we have fewest of few bureaucrats like you, Anand Singh ji, Jayan Singh ji, definitely we all, doctors, respected Sri Sampath sir, we of course are glad that a man of your stature is gracing and blessing Education Pe Charcha. I am coming to the next question, sir. That is, you are now is very, very important. You were nominated by the Economic Times as one of the policy change agent by the during the year 2010, 2012, 2015, and 2016. So, of course, you have given such a fantastic exemplification of one of the very important issue, one of your important pioneering step that in fact catalyzed into such a, that produced such a magnificent result. Of course, you have already given an example, but I think that since you continue to be in that particular prestigious list, so maybe a few more case studies, your own, exemplar work, which you would like to share with us. Please, sir.
I think the first two occasions where I was nominated, I was doing a scheme called Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, the health insurance scheme, which was cashless, paperless, and portable. It was the first of its kind in the world. And Economic Times took note of it and nominated me as one of the nominees for this award, because it was very unique. The scheme came to be recognized world over as one of the finest schemes. The UNO and the UNO recognized this as one of the pioneering schemes. The World Bank also recognized this. And they wanted me to do this scheme in other countries of the world. Of course, I stayed back in India, didn't join the World Bank. I continued to do a few things. So that was then. The other two later years were in my capacity as coal secretary, about which I've already told. We managed to overcome the coal shortages in India, and we were toying with the idea of exporting coal to Bangladesh, which was at that point in time was quite unthinkable, because we so woefully short of coal that no one thought that we would anytime think in terms of exporting coal. So these were two different sets of periods of my career when Economic Times felt that I should be a part of the nominees, though I didn't end up getting the award on none of these 4 years, but I was nominee in 4 years.
Thanks a lot, sir. Indeed, really very, very exciting for all of us to know that indeed the sort of pioneering works that you did, of course, you are entitled to all these sort of prestigious nomination. Sir, we are coming to a very important question, because you were also selected as one of the action heroes of India Today's 35 annual edition. Could you throw some light on the yardstick or parameters of such selection? why you think, of course, you have already given us a lot of hints as to why you all deserve to be in that prestigious list. But could you please throw some light on the parameters that that India today adopted for selecting for your selection as one of the awardees?
I have absolutely no idea what criteria. They actually awarded me for the work that I was doing for Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, for which Economic Times also nominated me. I have no idea what criteria they used, but what they asked me and the details that I discussed with them, and the chapter that appeared in India Today on the 35th annual institution was my indulgence in RSBY. So it was for the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, which I had explained to you earlier, being probably the first ever health insurance scheme which was paperless, cashless, and portable, that they thought that I deserved an award, and that's what they nominated me.
Thanks, sir. Thanks a lot. Of course, you did such a remarkable, spectacular sort of works. Obviously, from Education Pe Charcha also, we congratulate you. And of course, the books that you already wrote and you are in the process of writing, I'm sure I extend my best wishes, because apart from being a super bureaucrat, you are also a superb author. In as much as you already authored so many couple of books, and indeed you are on the verge of writing another one, entire IS fraternity and those who the would-be IS too would derive a lot of inspiration from all those magnum opus that you have already produced or in the process of producing. So I'm coming to next very, very important question, because as I already said that after retirement, we find few bureaucrats who evince as much interest in serving the society, in ameliorating the cause of society as you are doing. And of course, we have a living example or testimony of the same, in form of the Nexus Good, an initiative towards recognizing positive action and providing inspiration to the society at large to replicate them. Could you explain to our viewers the modus operandi of Nexus of Good? Please, sir.
When I was close to retirement, I was gradually coming to the conclusion that there is a lot of negativity in the society. But during my visits to the states, I discovered a lot of good work happening. The problem was that good work is not being noticed or being appreciated. So my objective was to see whether we can identify good work, whether we can understand good work, whether we can then appreciate good work, whether we can replicate good work, and whether we can scale good work. It's very important, because so much good work is happening. Unless we are able to identify it, we will not be able to demonstrate to the naysayers or Cassandras of doom that good work can happen, because good work is happening. It was not a theoretical statement that I was making. What I was trying to say was a lot of good work is happening in the society. Unfortunately, because of our fondness for masala, because of our fondness for all negativity or negative news, we don't look at. The nation wants to know only negative things. The world is collapsing, the country is collapsing. Not so. There are problems here and there, but there are a lot of good work that is happening. Can we then wear a different set of spectacles and start and be on the lookout for good work? Once we notice it, can we try and understand the what of that good work? And then the most difficult part, हम मुक्त कर्ण से बुराई तो करते हैं, मुक्त कर्ण से तारीफ नहीं करते. Can we have the courage to appreciate good work, for the simple reason that we need to promote good work? If we don't appreciate good work, why should somebody do good work? I mean, of course, some of them are incorrigible in the sense they will still do good work, but everyone wants a bit of recognition. So what is the harm in recognizing? In fact, there's a lot of good in recognizing. Secondly, all the rascals and ruffians of the world have come together and made life difficult for us. All the good people fight their battles all alone. How about good people coming together? So in order to fulfill these, this objective of mine in terms of promoting goodness, we set up an institution called Nexus of Good. It's a society. It's a trust under the Act. And we set up a foundation where we conduct regular webinars. We have a web portal where positive stories are there, www.nexusofgood.org.in. A lot of positive stories are there. Then we have a quarterly newsletter. We organize webinars very regularly on the good work that is happening. The fundamental point here is that we don't discuss theory here. We discuss practice. We discuss practice and then ideate from there. Meaning thereby that if this has happened, then how can we replicate and scale it? So all our ideation comes out of that. There are hundreds and thousands of people who follow it. There's a Twitter handle. There are hundreds of members of Nexus of Good. The movement seems to be growing. Whoever listens about it, they want to become a part of this movement. And we are encouraging others. It's very simple. Go to the portal. If you type Nexus of Good on Google, you'll go to the portal. You can easily become a member and then participate in that. We have city chapters, we have national chapter, we have these conferences. So we are trying to promote, we want to demonstrate to everyone, as I said earlier, good can happen because good is happening. I'm not preaching that you should do that, you should do that. No, what we are trying to say is that this is happening. Please take a look. You'll feel inspired. When you see action, you feel inspired. You know, there's a lot of gyan being distributed. People say, do this, don't do that, do that, which is very fine. But we are not Gyani Purush here. We are all action-oriented people. We see good work. We appreciate good work. We understand good work. We then attempt to replicate and scale.
Thanks a lot, sir. And when, as our August guest was, explicating on a very, very important organization which is presiding over in terms of, promoting good, because society indeed is passing through nightmarish experience today, as much as the Philistine forces, even though they may be few in number, but they appear to have taken over the society. And of course, they are spreading all sorts of canards, all sorts of propaganda. Goebbelsian propaganda has been institutionalized. In such duplicitous times as this, we need a Samaritan, and especially the one who has already served the nation with distinction to uplift the society from this, ongoing morass. So, sir, and in this context, I would like to quote one of the very important couplet, or rather, I would say verse, which I read while I was a mere boy. I don't remember the name of the foreign secretary who wrote that particular book. And the very starting, in the starting of the book, it was quoted, a particular verse was quoted, which, as sir has said, I would like to correlate that very significance of that very quote, in terms of the explication of our, honored, distinguished guest. Asankhya paradoshagya gunagya apikechana someva shadoshagya vidyante yadi panchasa. Many are those who see others' fault. There are some who see their virtues as well. Of those who see their own fault, alas, their number is very small. Of course, we must, before criticizing others, we must try to turn a searchlight inside ourselves to find our own follies, our own vulnerabilities, our own negativity before we start criticizing or being critical of others. This is what sir has so, candidly he had placed in our domain for us to ponder it and accordingly behave to bring light in our society, because society is indeed passing through a lot of turbulence, and one of which is religious polarization, which nation must overcome, and that too at a rapid pace if India as we have today is to be salvaged, is to be kept intact. Thank you, sir. And I'm going to a last very, very important question. It's so nice that you have enlightened us on all that. So we have rarest of rare IS officers who are such a distinguished author as your honored self are, because you already wrote such a great book, like Not Just a Civil Servant, which of course, as the very name suggests, is of course it has a very huge significance, and it speaks a volume about what the book is all about. So I would like you to explain something about this book also. Sir, Dr. Anil Swaroop, Shri Anil Swaroop ji, Anil Swaroop sir. Hello. There seems to have, the connection has been snapped. For the moment, I'm unable to see him. So, I would like to make an announcement before sir manages to, come back. Actually, our next guest is Dr. Bhanu Prakash, AS, neurosurgeon. So we have invited Dr. Vanu Prakash, a neurosurgeon, to Grace and Bless Education Pe Charcha on next Saturday. He is going to he is going to be our August guest, or esteemed guest on next Saturday. And I would like, because sir, all of a sudden connection has been snapped. I would like Shri Surendra, Dr. Surendra Pathak ji,
Yes, yes.
to just
Again,
our conversation in Hindi in
he
just
joined.
Surendra Pathak ji, please.
Uh,
Sir has joined.
there has been
Oh, sir,
there
join.
is a
Sir, actually,
there is
yes.
a,
So nice
there is
of
a
you to
load
have-
shedding here.
Okay, sir, you can just.
There is a
sir,
no, there is a
okay.
load shedding here. There has
Okay,
been a
okay.
load shedding here. There is a power
Right,
cut.
right, right.
So I am now gone on. But you can now conclude. I think we've had.
Okay, no, it's visible. You are very adequately visible. My dear viewers, as sir has just announced, because of unceremonious or sudden load shedding, actually sir was not visible. I was a bit worried because the last question on which he is going to shed light about the books that he had already authored and which has so much inspirational values for civil servants, would be IS officers, or any examinee for whatsoever examination, and all the bona fide citizens of this country, they need to read the books that such a man of maturity, man who has already performed as an upright, efficient bureaucrat, if he paints his own thoughts, obviously nations should lap it up. Sir, your take on books that is first not just a civil servant and the one which is on the verge of publication. Your take on this, please, sir.
The first book that I wrote, not just a civil servant, was basically to illustrate or take my own career as an example, to illustrate that a civil servant need not necessarily be only civil servant. Civil is normally understood in a very bureaucratic sense of absolutely going through the law and not going beyond violating law, but going beyond law for benefiting the people. That was the idea of the first book, where I'd taken examples of few schemes that I had run, my personal experience, where I took pride in the fact that I went beyond a typical civil servant to reach out to the masses. The second book was for a different reason. I used to go to the academy regularly, and there I discovered that when young officers join the service, they're very enthusiastic about it. But as they go up the ladder, they lose that enthusiasm, and some of them even become cynical. And they put the blame squarely on the environment, primarily on the politician. And this second book was to contest that. Yes, there are problems with the environment. Yes, there could be some problems with the politician, but the primary problem is with the civil servant himself. So if he so desires, he can actually perform well. And for this, he has to look at such officers who have done so very well despite these adverse circumstances. This is not to say that civil service is easy. My second book starts with this couplet. मुख्तसर सी जिंदगी के अजब से अफसाने हैं, यहाँ तीर भी चलाने हैं, परिंदे भी बचाने हैं. So it's a tough job. It's not an easy job. But despite this environmental problem that we have, political, economic, and otherwise, social problem, a large number of civil servants, of whom I've given examples, have done extremely, extremely well as civil servants. So the question is whether the civil servant is looking at such officers who failed or such officers who succeeded. So one of the chapters in my book says ethical behavior, meaning by that ethics is not merely something on a high pedestal. Ethical behavior is practice. Because if you behave ethically in your career, you are then honored and regarded even after retirement. Why not behave in an ethical manner? And ultimately, it depends on the concerned of who.
Sir, voice is cracking.
All person to be reckoned with. As a person to be reckoned. And
Sir,
I'm in the process of writing my third.
Actually, I think there was some sort of disturbance in our August guest communication because of some technical issue. So in the meanwhile, can I request Dr. Surendra Pathak ji to
Sir has joined again.
Okay, so I think the electricity is back. So let me complete the
Okay, please.
the third and the final book, the trilogy part, the third part of the trilogy, is going to be No More a Civil Servant, and it talks about more about my post-retirement life, where there are a set of chapters on Nexus of Good, there's a set of chapters on such officers who are making things happen on the ground, and I continue to engage with a lot of people in the society to see whatever little that I can contribute. So that is going to be my third book, No More a Civil Servant. Thank you very much for inviting me here. But because of this load shedding, we got cut off in between, but I enjoyed being here. Thank you.
So nice of you, sir. Actually, you illuminated our session. And I have no words. In fact, the words would fall short to acknowledge the sort of contribution that you have not only made to our soul, but to the overall education of the nation. So before I would just like to invite, because in your august presence, I would like Dr. Surendra Pathak ji, who is a stakeholder as well as a partner for this Education Pe Charcha, to just translate our version of conversation in Hindi. And I would like to make an announcement yet again. On next Saturday, we are going to have Dr. Bhanu Prakash, AS neurosurgeon, as our distinguished guest on next Saturday. Dr. Surendra Pathak ji, please, sir. And Avanti has प्लीज सर।
नमस्कार। बहुत कम लोग ऐसे होते हैं कि जो जीवन में ऊंचे लक्ष्य को तय करते हैं और उसको प्राप्त करते हैं। अनिल स्वरूप साहब ने सिविल सर्वेंट बनने का संकल्प लिया और उसको प्राप्त किया। फिर ऐसे भी बहुत कम लोग होते हैं जो सिविल सर्वेंट बनने के बाद बहुत जटिल समस्याओं का समाधान करते हैं, निराकरण करते हैं और बिना किसी विवाद में पड़े हुए कुछ इस प्रकार के निर्णय लेते हैं जिससे देश को और समाज को फायदा होता है। आपके पूरे वक्तव्य को सुनने के बाद कोल सेक्रेटरी के रूप में जिस प्रकार का डिसीजन आपने लिया, तो उससे ये स्पष्ट होता है। फिर बहुत कम ऐसे लोग होते हैं जो पॉलिसियां बनाते हैं, इन अनुभवों के आधार पर नीतियों को बनाते हैं और वो नीतियां समाज और राज्य के हित में होती हैं और उससे समाज और राज्य को आगे अग्रिम कार्य करने की प्रेरणा मिलती है और जो प्रशासनिक काम है, शासन और प्रशासन का जो काम है और ज्यादा ट्रांसपेरेंट होता है, पारदर्शी होता है और उसके साथ बहुत स्मूथ होता है, जिससे आगे और जटिलताएं पैदा नहीं होती हैं। आप अपने जीवन भर बहुत प्रकार से पॉलिसी बनाने का काम करते रहे, जिसके कारण से बहुत सारे परिवर्तन हुए, जैसा कि बताया कि इकोनॉमिक टाइम्स और इंडिया टुडे ने आपको पॉलिसी चेंज एजेंट के रूप में भी सम्मानित किया और आपको पहचाना। फिर एक और बात है जो आपके व्यक्तित्व में खास समझ में आई कि आपने जब कोल सेक्रेटरी से शिक्षा सचिव के रूप में जब आपने ज्वाइन किया, तो आपने शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में भी एक नए प्रयोग को जन्म दिया और उसके कारण से शिक्षा में एक बड़ा गुणात्मक परिवर्तन आया और उस गुणात्मक परिवर्तन के कारण शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में एक सुधार की संभावनाएं पैदा की। जैसा कि रजनीश झा जी विवेकानंद झा जी जिस प्रकार से आपसे प्रश्न कर रहे थे और आप उत्तर दे रहे थे, क्योंकि ये मेरा क्षेत्र नहीं है, मेरा क्षेत्र जो है दर्शन का है, लेकिन फिर भी मैं इस बात को आपके अंदर देख पाया कि आप समस्या को पहचान के समस्या को प्रचारित करने वाले व्यक्ति नहीं है। आप उस समस्या को पहचान के उस समस्या का समाधान करने वाले व्यक्ति के रूप में आपने पूरी जिंदगी काम किया, और ना केवल काम करने के बाद आपने उन सब बातों को अपनी पुस्तक के माध्यम से समाज के सामने लाया, ताकि जो विगत में जो कुछ घटनाएं हुई हैं वो रहस्य में ना पड़ी रहें, उसको आपकी पुस्तक के माध्यम से लोग समझकर उसकी पारदर्शिता को, उसके अंदर के छुपे रहस्य को समझ सकें। मुझे लगता है कि इस अर्थ में आपकी पुस्तक बहुत उपयोगी रही, और आप एक अच्छे लेखक के रूप में भी, जैसे आप बहुत ही अच्छे प्रशासनिक अधिकारी के रूप में रहे, वैसे ही बहुत अच्छे लेखक के रूप में आपने साहित्य के क्षेत्र में, नैतिकता के क्षेत्र में जो है योगदान दिया है। और लास्ट में जब आपने ये कहा कि समाज में जो नेगेटिविटी फैली हुई है, नकारात्मकता जो सामाजिक, आर्थिक, साहित्यिक आदि क्षेत्रों में, इकोनॉमिक क्षेत्रों में देखने को मिलती है, वो नेगेटिविटी कैसे दूर हो, ये आज आपकी चिंता है और आप उसके लिए समर्पित हैं। मुझे लगता है कि ये आज की जो चर्चा है, संवाद है, ये बहुत लोगों के लिए प्रेरक होगा, और लोग इससे अपने जीवन में प्रेरणा लेकर अपने व्यक्तित्व का विकास करेंगे और अपने योगदान के माध्यम से गुणात्मक परिवर्तन लाने का प्रयास करेंगे। इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। विवेकानंद जी का भी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Thank you, sir, and thanks to Dr. Surendra Pathak ji. And my dear viewers, today we have had a wonderful session, a very, very electrifying session with our very, very distinguished guest, who by virtue of his uprightness had served the bureaucracy with distinction. And I remember, my dear viewers, the way he had conducted himself throughout his career as a civil servant, that becomes simply an object of inspiration for all the fellow compatriots in whatever fields they may be. But of course, they can draw inspiration from the overall activity, from the overall work that our distinguished guest, Shri Anil Swaroop ji, has been doing throughout his life. My dear viewers, I remember in the very context, I recall one of the very important incidents in the life of Lord Buddha. Lord Buddha would never criticize any other saint. Whoever would go for seeking his advice, he would say that I don't say that what I am saying is absolute truth. What I say that I do have something to say. You weigh the pros and cons of what I say, and if you feel that it will take you towards the right direction, you follow that prescription. Or else, if you think that it is not going to prove good for you, it is not going to prove or make any improvement for you, you can just set it aside. Likewise, Sri Anil Swaroop ji's overall prescription in case of Nexus for Good happens to be the same as Lord Buddha had prescribed 1,000 millennia ago. That, you do whatever good you can do. I am not saying that whatever I am prescribing is Bhagavad Gita for you, but yes, I have some prescription. If you follow it in letter and spirit, that will definitely do good to the mankind. My dear viewers, publicly I would like to request Sri Anil Swaroop ji, if at all he could give some time to read my manuscript that is on the verge of publication, a journey from Rajniti to Lokniti. Sir, from this august platform, I would like to request you, if at all you could give some time to visit the manuscript of which is already edited and proofread, that is a journey from Rajniti to Lokniti, which has a prescription for the nation as to the course correction that nation should take, the trajectory that nation should follow. With these words, my dear viewers, I welcome, I greet all of you from Education Pe Charcha, and with once again reiteration about our next guest, that is Sri Banu Prakash A.S., brain neurosurgeon, to grace and bless our next Saturday's Education Pe Charcha. I thank our honored distinguished guest. I salute him from this platform of Education Pe Charcha, for his illuminating discussion, for having served the nation with distinction. I only salute him. I am so much thankful to Dr. Surendra Pathak ji, a very, very valued partner for Education Pe Charcha, to Sabya ji for doing all the necessary incidental work to keep this program going, and all our distinguished viewers, those who already have been logged in, and those eventually who will view this program. I express my deepest thanks to all my viewers. With this Vivekananda, author, academician, and public intellectual, return you to studio with a commitment to be back once again on at the same time.